Newsome, and this is my presentation on the impact of paternal-maternal cocaine use in development. In the 1970s, the Carter administration deemed cocaine a relatively benign substance, and this drug was off the priority list for the focus of the drug enforcement. Later, though, it was developed into a cheap and smokable form of cocaine called crack. This new form of cocaine was highly addictive and very appealing thanks to its low cost. Just 10 years later, the war on drugs made crack its primary nemesis. Due to affordability, crack users were more likely to be impoverished and black, while cocaine users were white and wealthy. The frenzy over the use of crack spread to prenatal maternal use of the drug during pregnancy. There are two primary pathways for damage done to the fetus by cocaine use, and the first of these two is neurochemical. The neurochemical effects of the drug led to inhibition of normal brain cell development in the early part of pregnancy and to abnormal brain development in the second part of the pregnancy. Neurobehavioral impacts can include tremors, irritability, startle, jitteriousness, poor feeding, and disturbed sleep. The second pathway for impacts on the impact of the developing fetus is vasoconstrictive. Vasoconstrictive pathway damages the fetus by restricting the blood flow to the fetus. The restriction can damage existing development or inhibit new development. In some cases, a one-time prenatal maternal use of cocaine can damage fetal tissue, even causing neurosis. And this damage is beyond the developing fetus' ability to repair itself. Since development is ongoing and the damage is caused by vasoconstriction, there is so many potential development effects of cocaine use that there is no such thing as a fetal cocaine syndrome, with clearly established and predictable symptoms as there is for, say, fetal alcohol syndrome. An aspect of development that is impacted in infants that were exposed in utero to cocaine is the ability to sustain attention. In one study, infants were recorded during free play, and recordings were later examined for sustained attention times. 6 and 12 months old were found to have significantly longer sustained looking at objects than other infants, while their engagement in banging toys was significantly shorter. The difference in looking might either be quicker development of the attention system or problems with informational processing efficiency. Another important aspect of development impact in infants that were exposed to cocaine in utero is the ability to self-regulate. Cardiovascular responses to stress or even to novel stimuli were more dramatic than the responses of infants that were not exposed to cocaine in utero. Self-regulation is the ability to control one's own emotions and behaviors, but obviously in the case of an infant, the expectations of self-regulation are much lower than for a child or adult. Self-calming or calming for caregivers is more challenging. In one study, most cocaine-exposed infants at 2 months were experiencing significant difficulties of self-regulation. Another very important trend for in utero exposed infants is related to head circumference. These infants that experience high exposure rates are born with head circumferences which is considered proportionally small for their bodies. While early pregnancy cocaine use is correlated with smaller babies, late pregnancy cocaine use is correlated to proportionally smaller heads. Proportionality of head circumference is linked to serious long-term developmental issues. When this condition is linked to long-term developmental problems, it is called systematic asymmetry. And in this case of cocaine, exposed children may be related to the fetal brain development that is impacted as described above. A healthy brain contributes to the ability to process information, sustain attention, and self-regulate, and all these are key factors in a healthy development. Because these systems may be challenged in children that are developing after having been exposed to cocaine in utero, both children and adolescents continue to experience developmental challenges. However, the findings regarding long-term development are largely optimistic and consistent. That is to say, findings that are consistent with that the effects of cocaine diminish with age and are largely mediated through social factors. Cocaine-exposed children tend to catch up with their peers over time. In fact, after an affirmation study that looked at self-regulation in 2-month-olds, by 7 months the same infants were already showing considerable improvements in self-regulation when they had competent and responsive caregivers in place. This is a significant cause for hope regarding the long-term outcome of children and young adults who were exposed to some amount of cocaine in the utero, and marks a contrast to the fear frenzy in the 80s associated with the war on drugs. And these are my references.